national security consultant, vice president of Understanding the Threat. Now, you may remember Chris's strong testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee last year and willful blindness, the consequences of the agency's efforts to de-emphasize radical Islam and combating terrorism. And welcome to the program. Chris, tell us about what you testified about and what you did. As I understand, you actually, were an intern with the Council on American Relations, CAIR, in Virginia in 2007.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Sean. So when I was working undercover with CAIR, and I want to emphasize for the audience, I posed as a Muslim convert. I'm actually a Christian, but I posed as a Muslim convert to get inside of Hamas doing business as CAIR. And what I testified in front of the U.S. Senate last year is very applicable to this morning and today after the Manchester attacks, which is that the Muslim Brotherhood, who is working to influence our Senate, Intelligence, Judiciary, and Homeland Security committees, has the exact same ideology as the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, which is to establish an Islamic State under Sharia. That is why they are fighting the jihad, whether it's in Manchester, whether it's in Syria, or whether it's CAIR influencing our Homeland Security right here in the United States. Look, we have to accept reality, Sean, and reality is that all these jihadi groups all over the planet tell us why they are fighting. And it's interesting to me that all these groups, whether it's Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, the Muslim Brotherhood, fill in the blank, how is it that they're all getting their version of Islam wrong in the exact same way? So what we have to acknowledge is that Islam, they are fighting for Allah, and they are waging jihad, and they are the basis for all of their fighting is the Sharia, which is derived right out of the Quran and right out of the Sunnah of their Prophet Muhammad. So Islam is the root of the problem. At some point, we have to acknowledge that, or we're going to continue to lose this war. One of the things, Sean, that we have to see from a national security perspective is 15 years after 9/11, and we still have not identified the enemy, who they are, why they're fighting, even though the enemy in this war tells us that they're Muslims waging jihad, and the blueprint for their doctrine, the reason that they're fighting is the Sharia, to establish the Sharia all over the planet. And that we see that over the last 1,400 years of Islamic history. And to Patrick's point, we have to have that conversation nationally. We have to start discussing that. And part of the reason that these terror attacks are so effective is that it shuts down the discussion. And that is why the Muslim Brotherhood worked so hard in this country to shut down, the company that I work for, Understanding the Threat. We train law enforcement on the enemy threat doctrine, Sharia, the jihadi network here in the U.S., which is primarily the Muslim Brotherhood. And then we train law enforcement how to investigate jihadi groups in their community. And groups like CAIR and the Muslim Brotherhood fight viciously and slander and smear us everywhere we go so that we can't even get in the room to train law enforcement. And if law enforcement doesn't understand this threat, if our military doesn't understand this threat, then you can't target an enemy that you refuse to identify, and therefore you can never defeat.
I mean, I guess maybe, Chris, you can relate to it in this sense because, here you infiltrated radicalism. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was a life-changing experience, and one of the things that I noticed when I was working inside the Muslim Brotherhood, specifically CAIR, was that the cozy relationship that the Muslim Brotherhood has with the media. To your point, how does the media get away with this? Well, they're working in this particular incident a day after Manchester. I can promise you from my experience working with the Muslim Brotherhood that CAIR is working with all of their media contacts right now to get the narrative out there that this attack has nothing to do with Islam. And so the media is more than willing to work with groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, who have the exact same ideology as the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, to shut down any discussion about Islam being part of the problem. This war that we're seeing right now, Sean, we see this war as one line of operation where it's people pulling triggers and it's blowing things up. And it's awful, and it's terrorizing, and it's barbaric, and it's savage. But the big war right now is the war of narratives. And when the media is constantly talking about Russia, necessarily we are not having the discussion about the real problems like border security, like jihad, how to defeat jihad. We're not having those discussions. We are on this show because you have the courage to actually talk about this. But other media outlets out there, they're asking the opinions of groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR, what they think about this. And of course, they're going to direct the line of conversation away from the real threat, which is jihad in Syria.